Hurricane Laura made landfall August 27th in 2020. The storm was a Category 4 hurricane, damaging about 50% of the housing stock in Calcasieu Parish.
What Laura did in 2020 was worse than any storm that has ever hit Southwest Louisiana. Laura was really more of a 30-mile wide tornado coming through Southwest Louisiana. Her winds were ferocious, and there are buildings within this city that have been standing for 100 years, and they were torn down by Hurricane Laura. They were torn to shreds as if they were a dollhouse by Hurricane Laura. So the impact was unimaginable. It looked like a war zone. It looked like tanks had gone down every street in this city and just fired on buildings the days after Laura. Unfortunately, today, as we sit 14 months later, there are still some neighborhoods that look like Laura just hit yesterday. So this has absolutely been a watershed moment for the city of Lake Charles, where we must have more progress, and where the federal government really has failed is the long-term cumulative response. Long-term recovery is very long. And in our case, with the city of Lake Charles, it is very unfortunate that we have been waiting 13 months for supplemental disaster aid. This is unacceptable. And there are far too many politics involved in long-term recovery. FEMA operates mainly under the auspices and direction of the Stafford Act. I am hopeful that the federal government is going to look at some of the failures to respond with supplemental disaster aid that we have experienced. And in the future, there should be basically a Stafford Act for supplemental disaster aid. It shouldn't be about politics. It shouldn't be about who your congressional delegation is. It shouldn't be about what political stroke your community has. We are just as much Americans here in Southwest Louisiana as any other community that has been affected by hurricanes over the last 30 years. And no other community in the last 30 years since supplemental disaster has been a thing has waited as long as we have, not to mention we went through more federally declared natural disasters over a 1-year period than any community in American history. And we waited longer for supplemental disaster aid than any other community in American history.
The housing is still an issue. It is our priority to rebuild right now. We're past this recovery and relief phase and really focusing on rebuilding. Temporary housing is a huge issue here as well. So people who are displaced from their homes being damaged are living elsewhere, possibly finding work elsewhere because the commute is just too much. So Calcasieu and Cameron parishes right now are really struggling. So we need to continue focusing on recovery and rebuilding.
They need supplemental disaster aid, which will help reestablish healthy, sustainable housing. We did receive an allocation of that. We're not exactly sure 100% what the number is going to be yet. It is woefully insufficient. We are thankful for it. I thank our congressional delegation, the president, and the governor, but it is woefully insufficient. And people need help reestablishing themselves in healthy, sustainable housing. And these are low to moderate income individuals. These are individuals who were the most vulnerable before the storm. They're 10 times more vulnerable today. These are people that felt marginalized by government before the storms. They feel even more marginalized today.
Housing is our main priority. So the help that is needed right now in Southwest Louisiana is rebuilding homes. People who were maybe underinsured or not insured are really left helpless here. We have a lot of that in Calcasieu and Cameron parishes. Cameron Parish did take the brunt of that hurricane, so the housing stock there, of course, is extremely damaged, and that is really the main need.
HUD has as part of its mission to help this segment of the population, and the supplemental disaster aid flows through HUD. Housing is absolutely our greatest priority, but also economic revitalization and infrastructure is huge. And with what we have been through over the last year, you can't compare that to what any other community's gone through, because no other community has been hit by 4 federally declared natural disasters over a 1 year period. Hurricane Laura, 6 weeks later, Hurricane Delta, a few months later, once in a generation winter storm, and then a couple months after that, a 1,000-year flood event affected this city. So housing, absolutely top priority, but close behind are economic revitalization and infrastructure.
A Louisiana benefit concert will be held to benefit the victims of Hurricanes Ida and Laura. The concert will be Sunday, November the 7th at the Cajundome in Lafayette. The concert is called the Ragin Country Crawl, and tickets are available at ragincc.com.